women win, America wins. And that is simply the truth. We are now half the workforce. The good news is that women now are graduating from college at the same rate as men. They're graduating from graduate school at a higher rate than men. But we still have this income gap, and men can play an important role in that. There's just no excuse for us to be in the year 2014 and a woman isn't earning the same thing as a man. We have legislation that's up on the hill. I like the guys who are clapping. I like it. We have legislation up on the hill right now that would add a little bit more teeth to the Lilly Ledbetter Fair Pay Act that the president signed his first bill when he took office. Because what happens right now is that oftentimes you don't know you're being discriminated against. And so Lilly Ledbetter basically said that the statute of limitations doesn't start to run until you find out you've been discriminated against. But how do you find out? And so Paycheck Fairness would say that if you share your compensation with a colleague, your employer cannot penalize you for that. Ah, yes. Doesn't that seem very simple? Well, what better way is to just make sure that people can share their information, and then you know before you wait 30 or 40 years. So we're supporting that, and there are a range of initiatives that, wearing my hat as chair of the White House Council on Women and Girls, and some of it's we have been putting in place. And just to take a moment, the council is made up of every agency and department in the federal government, and the president's charge to us is to focus on what to do to improve the quality of life for women and girls. And so it's everything but from getting them into the workforce and focusing on getting young girls, for example, to go into STEM fields, beginning in elementary school. Arne Duncan, with his Race to the Top, had an emphasis on programs that really reached out to young girls to get them excited about it, to dealing with sexual assault on all college campuses. When the presidents were in, I took a moment to talk to them about the fact that 1 in 4 girls, young women, are raped or attempted rape in their lifetime. And a lot of that happens, 80% of it happens before the age of 25. Half of it happens before the age of 18. That's unacceptable. And we have to lead by example. We have challenges within our own military with sexual assault, and we've got to end that. And the president, well, these young people are in our charge just as the young people are in the charge of our colleges and universities, and there's just no excuse for tolerating it. And oftentimes in both the military and in the college campuses, it's alcohol or drugs, but you know what? There's no excuse. No still means no, and we have to get everybody to understand that. And then we have to make sure that people, everyone from law enforcement to the people who are treating victims, everyone along the chain understands the trauma that these young people or people have gone through. And it's not just women, it's men as well. And so one of the accomplishments that we had, obviously, was signing the reauthorization of the Violence Against Women Act, which provides important tools that are necessary to try to combat sexual assault. So I always try to mention that because, again, it's something that each and every person in this room can do something about. If the numbers are 1 in 4, that means that there are victims and now hopefully survivors in this room.
So it seems to me that there's a consensus growing that high incarceration rates among young men of color is really devastating to individuals, to families, to communities, and to the city, and to the nation. So talk a little bit about your plans for lowering these rates and diminishing the harm.
Well, as the president mentioned in his State of the Union, he's going to be calling on our nation's foundations and business leaders to focus in on what can we do to help young boys and men of color, give them a better shot at success. And there are lots of initiatives that are already going on around the country that are working, and our challenge is how do we take those to scale? And you mentioned the incarceration rate, but how about if we get them on the right track so they don't go to prison in the first place? Isn't that great? And that begins with early childhood education, and it begins with giving them that sense that if they work hard, that there's an opportunity that waits for them down the way. Arne Duncan was telling me recently, and he's trying very hard to close the disparity in discipline gaps that you see along race. And so oftentimes, for the same infraction, you're finding boys of color are penalized much more harshly. And when you enter the juvenile delinquency system, the chances of you moving to the adult penal system grow dramatically. Well, let's keep those young boys in the classroom. Let's not give up on them because they've done something that shouldn't be punished. President, but I will say shortly, you'll be hearing much more from him on this, and it will be another example of where collaboration and convening and working without legislation is very important. Although I will say that Congressman Scott does have legislation before Congress right now to provide additional tools to make sure that young boys and men do not end up in the penal system. But if they do, we also have to provide them with the reentry when they come back. And that starts with a job. And it starts with making sure you have the skills that you need to compete for that job. And again, that's something that everybody can participate in doing.
So it was actually quite inspiring to read the New York Times article where President Obama revealed how much he was moved by the visit he had with the young men who participated in the Becoming a Man program, a program designed, implemented, and piloted now at scale here in Chicago, and it's showing an incredible return to school, increase in academics, and much less contact with the criminal justice system.
But just to correct you, it was Washington Post. I don't want to have our friends at the Washington Post angry. And the reason why I mention it is a reporter for the Post actually followed up on the president's visit, which was just about a year ago. It was soon after Hydia Pendleton was murdered that the president came here and went to Hyde Park High School and met with the band boys. And this reporter decided to follow up on it. And the president, not long after, well, in June of the same year, last year, invited the boys to the White House. And for those of you who didn't read the article, it was just amazing because, of course, these kids had no expectation when they met him in their high school that they would ever be invited to the White House. And it was in celebration of Father's Day. And they all signed a Father's Day card to him. And several of them said to the president, you know, I've never signed a Father's Day card. And the president said to them, I've never signed a Father's Day card. And when he met with them out at Hyde Park, he said to them, look, the only difference between you and me is I live in a more forgiving neighborhood. And he said, I did all the things that you're doing to get in trouble, but I had a safety net around me that kept me from being in peril the way you all are in peril. And the boys just couldn't believe when he met with them privately and told them some stories, which I will not share with you, about his childhood. And they were just, who are you talking about? He said, no, I'm talking about myself. And they're like, no, but you're the president of the United States. He said, yeah, I know, it's amazing. But it shows you what can happen if you really just, focus. And when we had the event with the college and university presidents, Bob will remember the young man who introduced the president, and he was from New Orleans, and he was a victim of Katrina. His family was homeless for a period of time, living in an abandoned building, and he was getting in all kinds of trouble. And at the age of 15, he saw his younger brothers and sisters were beginning to follow in his footsteps, and he just said, you know what, that's not what I want for them. And he taught himself to read, and he is, doing well and applying and off to college. And it just shows you what can happen when you make up your own mind that you're going to be successful, but then you have a safety net around you that helps you succeed. So focusing on these young boys and men of color is a top priority of the president. And I think having a president who has walked in their shoes is a perfect role model for what can happen if you decide you're going to make something real.
So I definitely think there are things that we can do here to align with that.
We'll look forward to it.
Let me